everyone. Tune in and turn up the volume for the very first episode of IDP Unplugged. Our guest here today is Mr. Amith Kumar. He is the Regional Senior Destination Manager of Canada and USA for IDP Middle East and Africa Regional Office. Mr. Amith is an education expert with over 15 years of experience in the education industry. So, welcome, Mr. Amith. How are you? How is your evening?
Thank you very much for having me on this podcast, and I'm doing very well this today. And Eid break, I got some time to unwind at Yes Island with my family. What about you guys? What did you do during the Eid break?
Pretty much just sat at home.
Yeah, just watching movies and shows.
I think that's one way to relax after having a busy schedule. So yeah, thank you once again for having me on this show.
So, Mr. Amith, today on this podcast, we wanted to talk about studying in Canada and a complete guide to studying abroad and a basic overview on what to expect from choosing a course to landing an acceptance letter. So, you yourself are an international student. So, could you share some light on how your experience was, and how?
That's correct. I was an international student. I completed my degree in 2008. I studied in Australia, based out of Sydney. And I've got to say, studying abroad was probably the best decision I made, because I wouldn't be doing this right now with both of you if I hadn't done that study abroad degree, right? The reason is because it made me more confident, more independent. I am able to do a lot of things on my own, away from family, away from that support that you always have, or backing you have. You tend to have to do a lot of things on your own, right? I feel this has really helped me to get to that point, and obviously I will, throughout this podcast, I will be sharing insights from my experience as an international student as well, and that's what I want to share with everybody on what it is and how it will really help you as well.
Alright, so you gain a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge from your experience abroad. So, adding on to that, we want to focus this conversation mainly on Canada and how it's like to study abroad in Canada. So, could you tell us why we should specifically go there and what are the perks of studying in Canada?
Okay, and I think before I touch upon why studying in Canada as well, I think it's important to also highlight, I did mention about my experience of studying abroad, but why it is important for every student to try this, this opportunity of studying abroad. Because one, as I mentioned, it makes you confident of doing things on your own. You tend to become independent, but something I've really realized over the years is it changed me as a person. It's a part of your personality development as well. You become your own once you go and study abroad. You're on your own. You're doing things on your own. You learn to, be flexible. You try to adapt to different situations. But I think most of all, you're going at an age where when you make friends there, they're going to be lifelong friends. And for me, that was a really key piece. And that's why I feel everyone should try this opportunity if they can to study abroad. Now, talking about studying in Canada, before that, I would like to address the elephant in the room. I'm sure there'll be more questions on this later in the podcast, but I thought I might highlight. We have seen quite a few policies come out, and I've heard a number of students asking, is Canada welcoming? And my answer is yes, it is. It is worth studying in Canada. And the reason that these policies have come into play is because the Canadian government wants to make it much more streamlined for international students, much more easier for the genuine students to go and study in Canada, and so that they have an equal access to healthcare, accommodation or housing, and also post-study work opportunities as well, right? Now let's go into why studying in Canada, right? First thing, let's break it up. Let's look at academic. You've got around, slightly over 10 institutions that are in the top 200 global ranking, right? And two, they are very well known for their research prowess. I'll give you an example. I'm guessing both of you know about BlackBerry.
Yes.
Definitely. Yes.
And if you watched the movie that came out last year, 2023, so both the founders are Canadians.
Oh.
So it is BlackBerry is actually a Canadian invention, right? So check out the movie; it's worth a watch. The other piece that you might not know is, do you know that peanut butter was actually made by a Canadian?
Oh.
No, I didn't know that.
So there you go. So there's a few other things, more on the serious side, like insulin, electric armchair, those were made. But there's an entire list on this. I just wanted to highlight the fun ones for this. Then the other piece is safety, right? One thing that Canada as a country has done is it's made it anyone who goes there, anyone who lives there, it's equal opportunity for everyone, right? So, and I think that's an important piece, and that's why Canada is so multicultural and diverse in terms of its population as well. And I think finally, something that a lot of internationals look forward to is being able to work in the country that they study and get that experience, and maybe take it wherever they go, right? So it's that opportunity that's there, and Canada offers a lot of that, right? So I think these are some of the key reasons why I feel students should study in Canada.
Maybe this will help another student come up with another innovation with the help of Canada.
For sure, could be one of you.
Maybe. So, in terms of the courses, like students get really overwhelmed by the sheer abundance of courses that are there, and there's so much information online. So, how do we go about like picking a specific course that's suited to us?
I'm going to share what I normally share when I speak to students, when I present to them. When I speak on careers or what you need to select when you are, say, in year 10 or in year 11, essentially think about what you want to do. Think about where you want to be, right? Think about what you do outside your, maybe your school education, or even if you are in university, what you do outside that. Do you think that is something you want to do as a career as well? So there's that possibility, right? When you select the institution, first thing you need to select is the program, the course, more than anything else, right? And understand what you want to learn, and based on that, and different institutions offer different programs. Additionally, some of the institutions offer similar programs, but the content of the program can be different. So maybe University A offers computer science and University B also offers computer science. But one of them focuses more on networks, the other one focuses more on, say, electrical circuits or hardware, etc. So at the end of the day, a student should look at the curriculum that's being taught in that university, because a lot of their curriculum is based on the research that university does, right? So based on that, just look at what you want to go for, and maybe that's the career they're looking at, and that's how you select your course, right? And that way, select your university as well. So first, remember, select your program or course, and then select your university. And it can be university, it can be a college. Maybe something you're looking at is something which is more hands-on, then you look at a college option as well. So I guess that's one way of trying to find which way you can go into this. Another piece is you can meet any counselor. I'm going to talk from our perspective, IDP's perspective. You can meet one of the counselors. They can share some options from their experience. We also have AI build system, a recommendation engine, which we use sometimes to mention the options as well. So it's a combination of both that our counselors will use to share some options, and that's something you can avail as well.
So can you talk about the standardized tests that are required for securing a place in a top university in Canada, and what exactly are expected from students who are aiming to go to top universities in Canada?
Great. Thanks for asking that question. It is a valid question, and I think before looking at that piece, it's important to understand a lot of the students I know, they aim for universities with rankings, very high rankings, or top universities or top colleges, as you mentioned. But it's also important to understand what you're looking for. So maybe they might or might not have the program you're looking for. So it's fine for you to look at different types of institutions that are available there, and ultimately focus on the course you want to do, and then select your university, right? Now, when it comes to your question about what standardized tests or what are requirements for this, in that sense, with all the institutions, one of the things that they will need is to do IELTS, or the English Language Proficiency Test. Now, this is not only required for the institution, but it's also required for the visa process. So that's why it's important to do that. And if I had to take a average, usually they look for 6.5 overall, 6 in each band. But again, always remember, check on the institution's website, check with the IDP Council on what the individual requirements for each of the programs or each of the institutions are. So it can vary. The other piece was, apart from that, there's no other test. They look at academics, so on what you've done previously and what your score is. Obviously, for students who are going for MBA, they do look at GMAT. And again, that varies. GMAT, work experience, etc. Right? But IELTS is an important piece that all students need to think about when they apply for any institution in Canada. All right. Thank you.
So, in terms of studying abroad, as a college student studying abroad, we tend to have like a very tight budget. So, what would be the average cost of living, like considering the tuition, healthcare, accommodation, and is there a way for international students to get scholarships?
Thanks. It's an important question and something that all international students ask when they meet any institution or even meet any of our counselors in the office. So one of the pieces is I will share the average cost of living and also the average cost of or tuition cost, and this is based on the Education Canada website, right? So it's what they have stated for the tuition fees is it's between 20,000. It can go up to close to 40,000. But again, remember this is an average. You always have to check what the actual pricing for that year is at that university. So always refer to the website or speak to an IDP counselor on that piece, right? That's one. Two is with the living costs. Recently, the immigration or IRCC, the Canadian government has changed that. So students are expected to showcase living expenses amounting to 20,635 per year, right? So this is basically the cost in that sense. And good question on the scholarships. Yes, international students can apply for scholarship. There are scholarships that are available at some of them or most of them, if not all, of the institutions. And a lot varies. Sometimes in terms of applying, it is automatically provided, given to you if you meet the requirements, academic requirements. And sometimes if it's like an external scholarship or if it's a special kind of a scholarship, you might have to apply separately. And this is where you might have to maybe put in an essay or a personal statement apart from sharing your academic documents. So that's two ways. So yeah, that is in terms of the cost and scholarships.
So moving on to a slightly controversial topic, could you also touch upon the visa process and specifically Canadian PR? How does one navigate through the official documents? Also, additionally, can you please shed some light upon how many years someone can stay and work post their completion of their degree?
Right. I'm guessing you're saying it's controversial because of obviously the new policies that have come out. But again, I mean, there's a lot of talk around it, and obviously when it comes to certain changes, people tend to take it negatively. But I can tell you that these changes or policies that have come in, the new policies that have been brought in to actually help the international students who want to go there and study, right? So it's making the whole process easy. Now, I'll just touch upon the visa process. I'm not going to go into detail because if they want to speak more detail, they can always go and meet a IDP counselor. But I'll touch upon certain points on this. Obviously, by now, a student who's applying for the visa should have received their offer. They should have accepted the offer and got something called the letter of acceptance. That's one piece. And now, before they apply for the visa, they also need to apply for something called a provisional attestation letter. This is something that has been added as an additional step after the new policies came out. Now, this is in line with the cap that has been put in place, right? It's just ensuring that the province is able to take that student and the universities or the college is able to cater to that student, right? So that's the reason why they need to obtain that provisional attestation letter as part of this. And that is a document that is also required along with the letter of acceptance from the institution. And obviously you need to submit your financial documents, academic documents. You need to provide your English proficiency test, so in this case IELTS, and then it gets submitted online, and once the immigration makes a decision on it, and if it's positive, obviously there'll be a request for the passport. And an additional step is students are also in certain countries where they may have to do medical test. They obviously may have to go for the biometric as well. Again, that depends from country to country, right? One thing that I forgot and which is very important is a personal statement. And the reason why I say it's very important is because the Canadian visa process does not have an interview. So the personal statement is where you're actually showcasing yourself to them and why you want to go and study in Canada for that particular program at that particular institution, right? Now, talking about I cannot give a lot of details on the PR because neither am I nor IDP, we are not a registered migration agent, but I can tell you certain aspects, like for example, what happens after a student completes their studies. There are certain post-study work opportunity visas. So for example, it's known as post-graduation work permit, right? In short, it's known as PGWP. So any student who studies 2 years more, they are eligible. I mean, 2 years they can get a 3-year post-study work visa, but the minimum requirement to get that visa is 8 months, 8 months and more. So if you study 8 months and more, you can apply for it. Again, that if you study say 8 months and more or up to 2 years, you will only get it for the duration that you've studied. So for example, I'll give you a simple example. If you have studied an 11-month program, you will get a 11-month PGWP. That's how it works. Okay. Now, if you study 2 years or more, then you get a 3-year PGWP. Again, there's been certain changes for master's students. Previously, for students who were studying masters, they could get a PGWP for the duration of their study. So any student who was studying say 1 year could only get a 1-year PGWP, or one was studying 1.5 or 2 years based on that. But now, if you're a master's student, regardless of the duration you're studying, you get a blanket 3-year post-graduation work permit. So they've made it much more easier for for master's students. The reason is because they want those kind of maybe more mature, skilled professionals in the workforce as well. So that's one piece. They're looking for that quality coming into their workforce in that sense. So that was it in terms of answering the visa process and the post-graduation work permit.
Okay. So since you mentioned personal statement, what do they look for in a personal statement, and how do we make it better and targeted?
Okay. So now personal statement, as I mentioned, it's a very important document. Now it's used for 3 points. Okay, in case it depends on the institution and also on where you're applying. But one, it's obviously something that you use when you apply for your to the university or college. So it's when you apply for an academic program. 2 is in some cases you might have to use it if you're applying for a scholarship. Now it's only for special cases in terms of scholarship, not always the case. Sometimes it's a personal statement, it could be a personal statement and an additional essay, or is it just an essay, right? And third place is of course the visa application. Now the personal statement is pretty much a student's blueprint. It's basically telling the admissions officer or the visa case officer who you are as a person, what was your motive, or what was your objective, or the reason behind you going and studying in Canada, or you wanting to study in Canada and you wanting to study that particular course in that particular university. So some of the things that they like to see is what really pushed you. Was there a passion behind it as such, right? For example, there's a student who highlighted in his personal statement the reason he's going for a bachelor of, he was going for an undergrad program in animation and illustration. And the reason he was going for that is because as a kid, he used to keep going to his uncle's place during summer holidays, and he used to keep playing games. Something that fascinated him was all the characters and how that was made. And that really developed the passion in him to go for that program. So this is just one story. So you're highlighting what was the reason. So that's one piece. 2 is why you have selected Canada as opposed to other destinations. There's so many other destinations. Why? Why have you selected that program, that particular university? How is that program going to help you for your future? If it's an undergrad student, how is it going to help you for the next step? Maybe they're going and studying further, or maybe they're going to apply for a job. And then for postgrad students, looking at the next step, how is this going to really help them? And is it connected to their passion or their previous study? So they need to really connect all these pieces and really showcase that in the personal statement. As I said, there's no interview, so it is very important that a student highlights it. And this is why it's important that the student writes this. And remember, your first draft is never the final draft. It is the first draft. You have to keep reworking or proofreading it and reworking until you are satisfied with the final outcome. And a tip is always get somebody who is maybe not from your field, maybe not your friend or someone outside, could be a relative or even IDP counselor to read it, because they will be able to give you a different view of how this sits, right? So yeah, I think that was my thing on my aspect on the personal statement and why it's important for it, and what you can add to that personal statement as well.
Alright, okay. So on a side note,
Yeah.
when we talk about Canada, a prominent name that keeps coming up is U15.
Right.
So could you please tell us about what U15 is and how an application for them is different from any other Canadian university, and what are the criterias for
Okay.
applying?
So I'll highlight one piece. It's not very different, but the criteria may slightly vary, and I'll come to that piece. First thing I'll address is U15. Now U15 is basically a coalition of 15 institutions or 15 universities that work together in research, right? So they work together. They do a lot of research. So they do get funding, and they also bring in a lot of funding from private investors to do this research, right? It's understood that their research is worth $8.5 billion per year, right? So that's what they do, and a lot of their research really helps the community, the country, and its growth. I think one of the aspects they are working on is AI and how it can help in building safe energy and obviously better use of energy as well. So this is just giving you an example, but this is what they work on. And some of the universities are Dalhousie, Western University, University of Alberta, University of Waterloo, just naming a few. But obviously, if you just check on the website, U15 website, you can get a lot more details. But this is what it is. They are more focused on research. They work on a lot of pieces. Hence, their curriculum will also be based on a lot of the research that they do in that sense, right? In terms of applying to them, it's not very different as I mentioned, but obviously their entry requirements will be slightly higher depending on the university for some of them. And again, it's all based on academics, right? So again, subject to subject, it could vary, right? The entry requirement for arts could be very different from engineering, and sometimes it also depends on the demand for certain programs, right? So then the entry requirements vary on that aspect as well. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so this is another kind of mildly disputable topic. So, what are your views on the job market in Canada? What is the skill gap that is there? And if you could also comment a little bit about the current state of the Canadian economy, where the inflation is said to be kind of high. It's improving, but still high. Yeah.
So I think it's an important point and something to think about. And one thing I've noticed, I've now traveled to a few countries, and recently I've been traveling to a few. Globally, inflation is a bit high. Economies globally has been affected, and I think if you look at any country, that's the case. And Canada, obviously, because it's a global issue, they have also had that case. However, now putting that in mind, one of the things I'm going to answer this slightly differently rather than talking about what the prospects or aspects are. There's always opportunity in Canada, that I can tell you, and that's one of the reasons why they are very welcoming in getting international students, and they want them to be part of their community, part of their workforce, contribute to the workforce and to the skilled workforce, right? And what I want to highlight is you need to make yourself seen out there. You need to create a brand for yourself, and the way you do that is when you're at uni, make sure you do things outside your curriculum as well, right? A lot of the programs would have co-op, right? But co-op is where you get an opportunity to go and work with a company. However, this is ingrained or is part of the curriculum. Sometimes companies want to see what you've done outside that. Have you done something outside your comfort zone? So it's very comfortable to get the university to help you in getting that co-op, getting you into a company and just doing that internship or the co-op in that semester. But a student should also think about going to the career service office to see if there is any other internship opportunities that they can do outside the co-op, right? Apply for those. volunteer at some companies. And I'm telling you all this based on my experience as an international student. I did this. I actually went and volunteered with one of the professors. I started working in the lab doing some research work, and over time, because of the work I did, I managed to get a summer scholarship through my professor supervisor. So there is always that opportunity, but you have to go out of your comfort zone. You might have to make it happen. Sometimes students tend to just apply online and expect something to happen. It may not happen. You might want to go to a company, drop your resume, have a chat with someone there, just try to see if they tell them that I'm happy to work volunteer, I just want to get the experience. And you never know, it can happen. A lot of students tend to get that happening. So any experience, whether it's volunteer, whether it's paid, it is experience, and you can put it on your resume or CV. And additionally, what it does, something that people don't see, is you gain a lot of soft skills that you can share. Your communication skills improve much better. Your interpersonal skills are better. You will know how to speak to a person, say in a corporate environment, as opposed to say in a very friendly environment. Say the way you interact with your friends will be very different from, say, the way you interact with a colleague in a workplace, right? So you'll start understanding that piece, and that's why sometimes when you apply for jobs, they're asking for that work experience because they want to know that you have that differentiation. You can do that, right? So that's one my tips on how you can keep yourself relevant and always keep learning. Even now, I tend to do programs. I'm not saying programs, but online courses just to develop some of my skills, because the world is changing. We also need to keep changing, and we need to upgrade ourselves. So that's why be agile, right?
Yeah, they say change is the only constant. So.
Correct.
And kind of as a follow-up, I want to ask about the there's a general trend for UAE students. They keep asking about the for international law, like degrees of that field. So could you tell how to like guide them towards going towards that?
Great. Thanks for sharing. Now again, one of the things that students will have to understand is it's important to see where you want to go and what you want to do. And as you mentioned, the students in UAE are interested. There's a lot more students interested in international law. But apart from international law, the other areas that students are looking at, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, machine learning, and with UAE space program, we have started seeing a lot of students asking about becoming an astronaut, getting into space science, getting into astronomy, right? So it's very important to understand that piece and see where you want to go, and obviously applying for that. Now, just touching upon quickly about the international law, there are certain programs in Canada where you cannot apply directly. Sometimes you need to do a precursor program. So, for example, medicine, dentistry, law, etc. Right? So you actually need to do a pre-law program at a university, and once you complete that, and when you are in Canada, you can apply at a law school. That's how it works. So generally, just to give you a summarization, that's generally how. But it'll be very good. So even if you look at certain countries, they have this integrated program where you do a Bachelor of Commerce and then the Bachelor of Law, right? That's the reason. Whereas here, they ask you to do the pre-law program separately, and then you apply for the law program. Right?
So would that be more of like a foundational course? Like what type of program is that?
So it'll be a general bachelor program, and then you go into law school and do your law program as well. Okay. So it's not like sometimes when you say foundational course, sometimes it's for a program where, say for example, a student has not met the entry requirement, or they just need to meet certain other requirements but they have not met, then they do a foundation course. And usually the foundation course is usually very good because it acclimatizes you to the education system there. And we have found a lot of students who do the foundation course tend to do better in uni when they go for the undergrad program, right? But law degree is different, right? So for somebody who might not be able to, say for example, get into a BCom because of entry requirement, they still have to do the foundation before they go for the pre-law program, right? So that's different. Pre-law program is basically doing something as in addition and before going to the law school, right?
So another question we had was, should students look at what jobs are relevant to Canada and accordingly apply?
Thanks for raising that question. While many would think, or some would think that that's a ideal way to go about or a smart way to do it, what you need to remember is that there may be certain roles or jobs that are currently available in Canada, and there could be a situation where that may change after you complete your degree. That's one piece. Second piece is, say you look at certain roles and you decide, okay, I want to study a degree that gets me into that role, but maybe that degree is not what you really want to do. So my advice to you is always go with what you're passionate about, what you're really interested in studying, because if you do that really well, it's definite that you will get a job somewhere, right? But if you tend to do something that you're not interested just because there is some sort of job opportunity that is there in the market at the moment, if you're not doing well in your academics, it won't really help you when you apply for a job in that sense. So it works that way. So you need to develop your soft skills, but at the same time, your academics should also be, if not top notch, good. To be able to succeed in applying for any job in that sense, right? So I think that should be the way you look at it. Go with what you really want to study rather than what the market really needs for now. Now, if there is a sync between what is there available or synergy between what's available in the market and what you're studying, that's well and good. But if not, doesn't matter, because if you're good at what you do, then you'll definitely end up getting a job somewhere, right? So yeah.
So moving on to the next question. What is the average length or like the duration for an undergrad, postgrad or a master's program in Canada?
Okay, so if you look at undergrads, it can be anywhere between 3 to 4 years generally. But if you look at postgrads, it can vary. Some of them are 1 year, some of them can be 2 years, some of them in between, right? So it also varies between the program that you're studying, and also depends upon the institutions that you apply to. So it's not always standard. There could be certain differences between these programs in terms of the duration.
Okay, so international students, they form about 2% of the total population in Canada, and out of that, a major chunk of them is actually Indians. So many students, when they apply to study abroad, not just in Canada but everywhere, they usually do it to get more exposure towards more diversity, to meet more people of different cultures. So could you please comment about that situation and how it affects the students?
Okay. So it's a valid point that you have raised, and obviously it's an interesting question. Now, the way I would like to put it is, yes, international students form 2% of the population, and there is a good portion of those being Indian students, but that doesn't mean that all the students are Indian students, right? There is still that diversity. Now, in your class, you may have maybe slightly more Indian students there, but there will still be students from other nationalities, right? So if you look at any of the destinations, any study abroad destinations, you will see that Indian students do form or do come in at least, if not the top 5, top 10, right? Generally, most of the countries, they are there in the top 5. But you will see other nationalities. So, for example, if you take Canada, if you have Indian students, you have Chinese students, you have Nigerian students, they do come in the top 5 from most number of student nationalities in a sense, say, if you look at it from a global perspective as well, right? But there's still a mix that students can adhere to, and what I would say is, as an international student, when you attend university or college, there is an habit for a lot of the students to maybe sometimes stick to people who are from maybe the same country or maybe from same community as such. And this is something that I did as an international student. So when I went to uni, I did notice, obviously, there were a number of Chinese students, there were a number of Indian students, but there were a number of other nationalities. So when I was in class, when I had to do some team assignments, I made sure that I was in a group where I wasn't with my friends. It was fine to do that in the first semester because you're trying to get used to the way things are and you need some support. But post that, I ensured that I was there in groups where we had different people. Again, they were some of them were from Southeast Asia. So, like in the team, there would be somebody from Indonesia, someone from Vietnam. So you'll still see some familiarity in terms of the locations, but they'll still be diverse in terms of where they're actually coming from, right? and it's also up to you to decide how you want to do it, right? So I was ready to break out from my friends and go out and be with different people and try to really learn from them as well on how they they look at certain business tactics or strategy in that sense. That's one way of putting it. But I think it's up to you on how you push forward. Sometimes, yes, in the class you may have certain population that's more than the others there, but you still have the opportunity to decide where you want to be when the team assignments are being done. That's one. And again, even if those students come from a particular country, they could have been, their host country could have been somewhere else. So I'll give you an example. You're talking about Indian students, but Indian students come from India, correct? They do come from UAE. There are Indian students who come from other parts of the Middle East. There are Indian students who come from Africa as well, right? And they all come with, at the end of the day, because they have brought up in those different environments, they come up with a different sort of perspective as well. And that's what you need to look at in an overall picture, or if you look at the umbrella of it, like the big picture in that piece, right? So yes, there is, if the data says that way, yes, it is what it is, but it may not entirely be true if you try and connect with those students, because at the end of the day, you're also learning from their experiences while they're there as well, right?
Yeah, we can apply that to the workplace as well, not just
Correct.
university.
Yes. The same piece applies as well when you're working in certain companies and in working in different countries as well.
So, what are some courses that you might say are Canadian specialties, and which courses do students usually consider Canada for?
Okay. So if we look at the programs that students look for, if I have to look at what they search for or what they try to find, initially it's always like medicine, health science. There could be some other science programs or STEM programs, but eventually sometimes people tend to change over time. So generally, if we look at what students are going for, mainly business programs, and then you have students who look at STEM programs. So STEM, science, technology, engineering, those are areas that students actually go for. What we have seen recently that has really picked up, one is computer science areas or IT areas, and then obviously arts or creative arts is really picking up in that sense. And it also depends on where the students are coming from as well. Sometimes some of them have a background where I think you talked about international law, so some of the students won't go for law as well. And then some of them want to get into research, and you'll see they tend to be more science focused, so some of them go for those programs as well, and they plan it out. So they try to do bachelor's, they want to go into master's research, so they have a plan that they plan to. But these are some of the areas, key areas, which is common for a lot of students coming from, but in UAE in that sense as well.
So, how would you say the Canadian educational system functions? And is it practical? Is it theoretical? And how can international students prepare to be at par with this?
Okay, it's a mix of both. If you look at theoretical and practical or applied. So what happens is students have to, one thing they need to be prepared is they shouldn't be expecting that they're going there, they're taught in a class and they'll just read from a textbook and that's it, and then they go for the examination. It doesn't work that way. They have to be prepared to read outside that, one textbook. They'll need to go through research journals. Again, in the textbook, it could be 10 pages from here or 20 pages from another textbook, and then it's an amalgamation of all this that you're teaching. Because remember that some of your lecturers are also researchers, and they tend to bring in some of their work into what they teach as well. So you will always also have to read outside what you are given, and this will really help you because when you go, it'll help you when you do your assignments, because a lot of the assignments are very applied in what you have to talk about. It could be some, some global issue that you will have to work around, or you need to put your thoughts to it, or it could be a problem that's happening locally in Canada, which they want to see what kind of thought process you have. They could be presentations, they could be group assignments, different ways that you'll be assessed. So you'll be constantly assessed, and your grades will be accumulative of all this. Obviously, they will be, for some of them, they'll definitely have an examination which form a part of your final grade. And again, with those questions, it could be very applied as well. So that's why I said you need to read a lot outside what you what you learn in the classroom or beyond that. And you also have things like tutorials where you have discussions with other students. You're given some assignments where you need to look at this. How do you go about doing this process or project as such in that way? Just giving you an example from my experience as a student, right? Um, it When I did one of the programs, this was for international business strategy, right? And one of the things we had to do is we had to do a project, right? And in this project, we had to figure out how people think when they buy some products and what are their thought process after buying it as such. And we we actually did surveys. We actually did some video interviews. So you have to sometimes think of different ways and get some real content into your assignments and really put it out there as well, right? So what I'm trying to tell you, it's very applied. Theoretical are the piece where the professor or the lecturer actually shares some of what is there in the curriculum, but then you also need to make sure that you read outside what is there and also add that because there'll be a lot of discussions, there'll be opportunities for you to ask questions, for you to share your insights as well during the class lectures.
Okay. So to add on to our previous line of questioning, in Jan of this year, 2024, the Canadian government announced an immediate 2-year cap on international students' permit, reducing the intake of international students by 35%. So the cap was announced to combat systematic abuses and housing crisis, but international students applying despite this. So how will you, or rather how does IDP guide them and support them through this, and how does this affect students applying for the current intake?
Great. Thank you. It's good. I know we have spoken bits and pieces on this particular policy change throughout this podcast, and it's good that you raise it here. One thing I need to tell you is yes, 35% as a percentage looks big, right? But by no means is, and the total number that they are talking about is 360,000 students who can still go to Canada to study, right? And if you look at that number, it is still very big, right? And even though we are taking it in a global perspective, it is still a sizable number, and there is opportunity for students to still go, and as such. The reason that they put such a cap is basically because they want to ensure that the students who are going there have confirmed accommodation. It shouldn't be a case where they're going there, they don't have confirmed accommodation, they're still trying to find something. 2 is they have access to all healthcare facilities, make sure everyone has that. And 3 is make sure students have access to, or there's enough part-time jobs for students to be able to apply to, and also post the studies that they can look at some work opportunities. So keeping all that in mind, they've come at a number that they feel that the country can sustain for now. And obviously this is a temporary cap as of now. This is what the government has announced, right? Which means over time they are going to assess the situation and they will work at changing it. Again, we don't know how this will move, but at least you shouldn't see this as a negative thing. It is a positive thing because the government is looking at international students and making sure that they have the best possible experience when they are in Canada, right? So that's why they've come up with this. Now, in the midst of all this, obviously there's a lot of confusion, and I think the way we are, or IDP helps, or what we have done, at least when the policies were released, is we ran information sessions across, not just in UA, across the Middle East and Africa, just to highlight what it means. Because sometimes when you see all this policies come out, it may seem as a lot of jargon. There's a lot of things that have been put in sentences and people are not able to understand. So we're trying to make it simple and easy for people to understand what it means. That was one. And our counselors, the IDP officers have understood all the policies and they share that with students, and they can guide you on what are the next steps throughout this whole process, right? So guiding them throughout and also preparing them before they travel. So one of the things that we do at IDP is we do pre-departure briefings, and what I mean by that is basically before a student travels, we try and get them to understand what they need to do before they travel, while they're traveling, and once they are there, so that they are prepared and they know what they need to do once they are across, they are in Canada as well. So they're prepared for the whole process, right? And for now, I think in terms of the current intake, the way The only, I think the only way it was affecting is that students were waiting for this initial document of provisional attestation letter. When this was announced, obviously all the provinces were working out how to release them, how to work out the process, and once that was done, and obviously once that was done, the PALs, as it's called in short or an acronym, have been released now then on time, I guess, for some of the students, and they are applying. Obviously, some of the students have had to defer their plans to the next intake, which is in a way it's okay because it's better to be ready rather than rushing and going in for an intake, right? So yeah.
Canadians are very well known for their for being really polite. Like that's a popular stereotype about them. That their favorite word is like sorry and thank you. So could you just like talk more about how the culture is there? How is their lifestyle?
So I've traveled there a couple of times, and one of the things so the first time I traveled to Canada, I went to Toronto, and it was very surprising to me because I would go there, I'm sitting at a restaurant, I'm sitting down just having dinner with my colleague, and a person who had just traveled in, and he came to Toronto, and he came from Vancouver, I believe from Vancouver. He was sitting right next to us, and you saw that, we're generally chatting, and he just struck up a conversation. And that was quite interesting, and he was so open, he was trying to have that chat with us, telling us a bit about what he does and what we can see in Canada, where we can go around in Toronto. And similarly, this wasn't a one-off case. So wherever we went, we had people opening up and just really generally having a chat. So one way I can say is, if you went into a room with Canadians, it's very easy to strike up a conversation. You would never have a challenge in striking up a conversation. That's what I felt when I did. So what that means is they're very welcoming people. They are open and they don't really, they are open to seeing different types of people. They are okay with having various kind of chats. And I feel that's a very important trait whenever, especially for an international student who's going to a foreign country. If the people there are really open and welcoming, I think that's a very positive thing, right? So that was and I found that very interesting because I've lived in different places. I've lived in, as I mentioned, in Kenya. I've been in Australia, but I found this very, very exciting in a sense, and I am excited for all the international students who go there to study as well.
So I had a question about transfer students. So let's say a student has done a year or two in the UAE. Can they transfer to a university in Canada? Is it possible?
Yes, it is possible. Now, obviously, the other piece that students may ask you is, what about whatever I studied in the UAE university, right? It can be transferred, but when a student applies, in such a case, when a student applies, they need to, apart from their application, their academic documents, they'll have to submit the entire syllabus of whatever they've studied right now, because at that university, the faculty or academics will then have to do a matching process to see which of the subjects that they have studied matches with whatever they have in their first 2 years as such. And based on that, they'll get credit for previous studies. So sometimes, based on their academics, they will get entry, but based on what they've studied, they will also get to know how many years they have to study. So some students may just have to then study 2 years, additional 2 years, or maybe they may have to do 2.5 years, additional 2.5 years, because some of the subjects does not meet their requirement. You see, so for those students, they'll have to apply and see. It's a case on case basis. That's it. But it's possible to, even if you have started here and you want to transfer to a university in Canada.
We need to talk about Canada's weather because it's known for having like pretty extremely cold winters. So how can students who may be coming from UAE and we're so used to the sunshine, so how can we prepare for that and how to pack?
I would have to say if you're going for winter, pack heavy because so let's look at it from season wise, right? They have different seasons, and most of the students tend to go for September intake or fall, right? And usually in fall, it's a great time to be there because Canada is very beautiful. Trees, the leaves start turning from green to red, yellow, orange. But at the same time, it starts getting cooler because around December to February is when you have winter. So fall is sort of at the start of that. Until now, when I've always gone around I've gone around October, November, and though it is not yet winter, it still gets very cold. But especially because I'm going from UA, I feel the cold a bit more than probably the others. And the funny part was the first year I was in Toronto, pretty cold, and then second year was Vancouver, which I felt was cold as well. But people are saying Vancouver was the much more warmer place. And I was thinking, what are they talking about? It's still like 5-10 degrees. That is definitely very cold. So for those who are coming from tropical areas or desert areas like UAE, we definitely felt the cold. And I was talking to a student there. How do you manage yourself? It's really cold, right? So they said, look, the first few months can be difficult, but post that we got used to. You will understand what kind of clothes you have to wear, how to go about, and as long as you're covered, you have proper jackets, you have your gloves, you're probably wearing your skull caps and such, you'll be fine, right? And that's what I did when I went there. Second time I was well prepared when I went there, and I had no issues. First time I wasn't sure because I was thinking fall, okay, it's a great time, it won't be that cold. I just went with like one jacket and I had to get the rest of the stuff while I was there. So yeah, be prepared. Think about the season that you're going in and prepare according to that. So when you're going in, say around Jan, it is winter. So you need to really make sure that it's the middle of the winter. So you need to prepare for that. So you need to take your jackets, carry what you can, and you can always buy some from there because sometimes they have sales. Make sure you go for those sales. Always shop during discount sales. That's, as an international student, that should be your thumb rule, right? So do that. And then around May, it sort of gets warmer. And if you're traveling in May, then pack lighter. And usually during summer is when you buy winter clothes because it'll all be discounted. And during winter is when you buy summer clothes because it'll be the other way around. So that's still a smart way of shopping as well during that time, right? So yeah, I think that's a way you can get acclimatized to the weather. And I still feel once you get used to it, the winter is not too bad. That's
And then also in terms of the like how will the experience be, like how will the life on campus?
Look, with that, instead of telling what it'll be like, I would want to advise that make the most about your experience there. The reason I'm saying is, yes, you're going there to study, but for you to really develop as an individual, it's what you learn also outside your classroom. The people you meet, the kind of interactions you have. Make sure you attend orientation because orientation tends to be the most important part in getting used to that environment. You join clubs, you get access to other people, you start making friends, and this could be your friends for life, right? So this is where that's why it's important to attend orientation. And the clubs are an easy way for you to meet people, right? And make sure you're open and you have an open heart. Don't try to perceive people before you really talk to them. Just make sure you give them a chance, right? So that's one way of really enjoying that experience. And to be honest, when you're traveling, I know everyone's going to be nervous. That's there. It's always there when you travel to a new country. But keep an open mind, and it will be really fine. It'll be really fine. One tip, once you're there as well, is once you're there, make sure you understand your locality, understand where you are. Plan your route to the university. If you're staying further away, make sure you know how you're going to get there before, and not on the day that you have to join uni, right? You're scampering and trying to find, where's the bus, or as such, which way should I take? Make sure you plan that a day or two before. At least that's what I did, just to understand where I had to go. But I know, as experience, at least from my study abroad experience, it is something to cherish and it will be fun. You will find different people you can interact with. From academic point of view, it could be slightly different. There'll be a lot expected out of you, so make sure you're ready for that and be prepared to learn a lot of things before you get to the classroom as well. So if there's any reading that you have to complete, make sure you do that because it is vital and it's beneficial. I learned it that way, so that's why I'm telling all of you that I'm making it easy for you. So make sure you prepare yourself before you do that. And one advice I always give all students is be agile. Always be ready to adapt, be flexible. When you're living with someone, say for example you're on a shared accommodation, you can never find a perfect roommate or a perfect person who's going to be there. They will always have positives, negatives. Try to work around the negatives. Make the negatives that they have as your positives. So things that they might not do, you can do it and sort of balance it. And that's how, when I lived throughout with different roommates, different housemates, this is how we managed without even having any argument. We always had, everyone will have an argument, but it never turned into fights or things like we split apart or things like that, right? So yeah, be agile. That's my final piece of advice to all of you. And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for watching, our dear viewers. I hope you found something that is useful and helpful. And for more such content, please follow IDP UAE. Please like, share, and subscribe.